Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session on navigating complex buyer journeys for automotive and beyond. We're just going to give it a few seconds to let people filter into the meeting. Today's session is due to last between 45 and 60 minutes. Just a few bits of quick housekeeping. Should you wish to submit questions to the panelists, and we encourage you to do so throughout today's session, you can do so in the Q&A function, which should be at the bottom of your screen. You can submit questions at any time. The panelists, I'm sure, will be more than happy to get to those throughout today's session. Also, with the recordings from today's session, we'll be sending those out to you guys directly. It will be held on the same viewing link that you use to view today's session. If you have any issues with that at all, or if you don't receive the recordings, please feel free to reach out to me at paul.bergamini@thomsonreuters.com. You should have received an email from me at some point in the lead up to this. So please feel free to reach out to me directly, and either I or the Treasure Data team will be happy to get in touch with you directly. With that, I'm going to hand over to our host for today, Zach. Zach, I'll let you take it away from there.
Great. Paul, thank you so much. Thank you for organizing this and bringing us together to talk about navigating the complex buyer journey for automotive brands and beyond. And I'm excited to dive into this today. But before we get started and kind of get into the questions, I think it's only appropriate to do a round of introductions. And since I will never do everybody as much justice as they'll do for themselves, we'll go around the horn here. And Jordan, I'll let you kick it off, and then we'll work our way through, and then we'll jump in.
Perfect. Thanks, Zach. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Jordan Tariainen. I am with AWS. I am in their auto and manufacturing business unit, and I lead global partner strategy focused on the digital customer experience and connected mobility. I spent about 10 years at General Motors prior to AWS, and I'm very excited to be here. And Brian, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you. So excited to talk about this topic as more and more dealer groups and dealers are focused on customer experience and managing their first-party data. I've been in automotive retail for 18 years, founding the Pash Group, and my more recent focus and research is on customer data platforms and how working with OEMs and dealers, we can create a unified, personalized experience for the auto shopper.
Awesome. Well, hello, everybody. Kirk Preiser here. I am the Director of Retail Buying Experience at Audi of America. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today and with these tremendous speakers to talk about this topic. At Audi, our department is responsible for the entire purchase experience. So that's going to be the digital and the physical experience. So it all starts with the first interaction with a website. So we are responsible for the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 website experiences, especially on the purchasing side. And then we transition into what that experience is going to be at the dealership. So the people and process side of it and all the way through to the delivery of the vehicle. So part of the team works on the digital experience. The other part of the team is in dealership working with our dealers on the actual process side of it. So it's a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about this.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you. I am Zach Winthy. I'm the CDP evangelist for Treasure Data. My job is to go out and educate individuals, companies, businesses on what is a CDP, what does it do, and more importantly, how does it impact your bottom line. And so, just kind of quick, level setting for those of you who are maybe not entirely familiar with CDP or have passing familiarity. I thought I'd kind of set up the foundation before we jump in. So, as the promise of a CDP, whether it's Treasure Data or others that Brian and others have worked with, the reality is it's all about taking all of that first party data, all of those touch points from a variety of systems, web, CRM systems, in-store interactions, Wi-Fi, you name it, and bringing that together and to create that single unified profile that allows the marketing team, operations teams, product teams to unlock those connected customer experiences across all of the customer touch points, making all of those downstream systems smarter and more intelligent. And in the automotive space, it's really important because, as we're going to talk about today, the idea of the complex buying journey. There's so many different ways to enter, exit, jump in, jump out of the buying journey when it comes to, from a consumer's perspective, buying a car. That I think it's more important than ever to kind of think about how do we bring all that data together into a single point. So I think before we go into the tough questions, maybe Brian, I'll start with you, since you've been in this space and worked with a lot of different brands. Let's just define what is a complex buyer journey. Like, how would you define it, and why is why is this more complex than maybe other types of customer journeys? And Brian, you're on mute.
There we go. Yes, there we go. Early on. In uses outside of automotive, say in e-commerce, normally companies have a single platform which provides end-to-end visibility to the customer journey. So extracting data from a transactional single platform into a CDP is easier. In automotive, we have fractional views. The average dealer has 12 plus different software platforms that often don't talk to each other. This slide shows them, but dealers know that the customer journey is the sum of all of the touch points, the influences, the click signals, the advertising. And for most dealers, the website has a piece, the CRM has a piece, the DMS has a piece, the chat company has a piece, their equity mining, their direct mail company, they're all working in different silos. So what makes the automotive retail customer journey so complex is there's never been open APIs. There's never been standards for data exchange. There hasn't been a business case made. But what we're going to talk about today is going to be the future. Dealers typically have two primary legs in their software platform, their CRM and DMS, and I'm going to make the bold prediction that the more advanced dealer groups are going to now have a third leg, and that will be the customer data platform. It will be those three pieces that will create the realization of a better customer journey and personalized buying experience.
Great. So what makes a good customer journey, or what's a good example of, brands who have kind of navigated this, this experience? Kirk, I mean, obviously you live this, so, maybe you have some perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look into the marketplace all the time at other brands outside of automotive to see, who's doing well at this and who's doing a good job. I mean, I think most of us would say that Apple does a pretty good job of getting data from all different interactions with consumers, consumers that buy their product, consumers that service the product, consumers that shop for their product, and they have multiple different retail channels. So I like to look at them as a good example for automotive, because they're not just OEM direct. If Apple sold everything directly to their consumers, it'd be a little bit easier, but they have multiple different channels by which consumers can purchase their goods as well as service their goods. But they do a pretty good job of kind of bringing it all together. Now, I will say it's a little bit easier because it's hard to use their products without an Apple ID. Right. And that's kind of how it ties everything together, is that Apple ID. Could we make customers sign in every single time they want to drive one of our vehicles or interact with our products? Yeah, and to some extent our Audi Connect services do that, but it's a little bit probably more challenging, I think, for a car company to kind of connect the dots. But we're getting better at it. I think from an automotive perspective, Tesla certainly does a really good job, and because they're OEM direct. And so as Brian mentions, they can control the whole entire experience and the whole entire platform. And so it's a little bit more challenging for traditional OEMs because, as Brian mentioned, we have to piece it all together. The dealers have a ton of data with respect to their consumers, who's bought a car, who's serviced the car, et cetera. And then we have a lot of data with respect to people that have called into our customer experience center, who have shopped on our tier 1 website, et cetera. Now the question is, how do we merge it all together and make it useful for everybody? And so I'm pretty proud of the fact that we were able to go out last year and get a groundbreaking digital cooperation agreement signed with all of our dealers. It was a long process to get it done, but it's something that we've never had before. We've been able to share lead data, but that's about it. And so the digital cooperation agreement now gives us a platform by which we can ingest dealer data and they can ingest some of our data, and we can put it together in a useful place. We're just kind of getting started right now. We do have some information that dealers can see about a consumer that they've never had access to before, but that's going to continue to expand and grow as we move forward, because we know that cooperation with our dealer partners is the most important thing in the future. We got to we got to figure out a way to put all this data together into one place and use it effectively.
And obviously there's technology that can support that. But I think, a lot of times, Kirk, like you just said, it starts with that cooperation. It starts with that conversation. So, Brian, maybe Jordan, I'll come to you. We'll talk about tech in a second. But, Brian, from a process perspective or from a people perspective, how do organizations start kind of thinking about this buyer journey and really putting some muscle behind it, mapping it out, or what are the key steps and maybe considerations?
Great. Well, the first thing is the organization has to primarily make a commitment that they want to improve the customer experience, and that should result in a higher lifetime value and greater loyalty. So first of all, they have to say, we have a lot to improve. The process, and I've built out a framework for this as I've been working with dealer groups who are trying to unify their data on great platforms like Treasure Data, is seeing the number of vendors that are involved and the channels by which they communicate. What type of data exchange does each platform vendor offer? And then here's the big one, the transactional volume. And when you start to see, when this framework starts to get built out, and you say, how many pieces of direct mail are we sending out a year? How many inbound phone calls? How many outbound phone calls? How many emails that we send out in the sales process? How many emails we send out in service? How many text messages? I mean, one dealer group I'm working with had 80 million page views on their website a year, 80 million. When you start to realize how much activity is involved in an auto dealer, once you map this out, then the light bulbs go, is like, man, if we could coordinate some of this activity, if we could suppress people out of campaigns in real time, if we could control the cadence between variable ops and fixed ops, I mean, for dealer groups, we're talking millions of dollars. Platforms like Treasure Data offer 10x or more ROI. They have to map it out, like, where are all the cooks in the kitchen and how often are they serving up a stew, and let's get to a Michelin star experience. That process normally gets the executives excited.
Well, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, technology is always important part of it, but if the people in the process and you haven't done the legwork up front and kind of thought through the process, it's always a challenge. But you said something important in there. You said ROI. You said, you measuring ROI and understanding that. And Jordan, you're smiling. So let's toss to you. How do we measure that? How do we drive ROI and understanding from the buyer journey? How do we tie back all those good things we want to do to the actual impact it drives?
Yeah, I just want to chime in a second on Brian's response too, just on that customer journey point. When you think of all of the different brands and business units and dealers and really map out that journey, it's just crazy how many touch points the average consumer gets over that first 90-day period, and really mapping out the journey and figuring out those friction points and those redundancies is incredibly important. So from an ROI perspective though, I would break it up into, I would say, almost three categories, right? First, you want to measure like the overall sentiment towards your brand. So some of those common metrics are things like Net Promoter Score, right? How do people view your brand, by vehicle line, by trim level? It's really however deep you want to go. Then you could consider things like voice of the customer, right? Voice of the customer platforms, voice of the customer sentiment by channel of that buying journey. So what are they saying about your experience on the web versus the mobile app versus the dealer channel? After that vehicle's purchased in the service lane, how is that buying journey within the service department? I would say from a sales and revenue perspective, how you could potentially measure the ROI. is, what is your sales conversion rate? When somebody's browsing the website and building a vehicle or sending a lead to a dealer, how often are you converting? Customer lifetime value. That's obviously a very important metric as well, right? What's that total value of that customer to your brand or to your company over their entire relationship when you consider, not just vehicle purchases, but service experiences, those adjacency revenues. A lot of companies are getting into insurance right now, or software enabled services, right? Like, how much is Zach worth to my brand over time? And then I would say overall, from like an industry lens perspective, market share, right? That's just such a big metric to be measuring. Are you gaining? Are you losing? And I really believe that strong end-to-end buying journey will result in gains in market share. So it's a nice macro level metric to see how you're doing.
And Jordan, let me just add a couple things that I think actively, as I've worked with a team at Treasure Data and other platforms, there's a couple things that dealers have been wanting to, especially dealer groups. One, an existing customer is out shopping again, but on a different site, right? So with a dealer group that has 30 stores or 50 stores, they don't know today when the customer in the Honda store is out shopping at the Toyota store or the Chevy store, but within their group. So number one, instant alerting on when existing customers are shopping. That's a huge one. Even though marketing is brought up oftentimes in this customer journey, suppression from marketing campaigns based on a triggered, they're in a service workflow, they're getting emails and Facebook campaigns, but then they book a service. The fact that they can be instantly taken out of marketing suppression, especially on things that cost money. And then, and another piece that I think is missed, I don't think the big money is in marketing. I think it's in one-to-one personalized communication. And this is where having unified view of the customer, knowing their preference of communication channel, like are they an emailer, are they a texter, or are they a phone person? And knowing this data and working in real time, I mean, the revenue opportunities come from, suppression, better targeting, but there's whole new channels of revenue that dealers have only dreamed of, but they've never been able to realize. And today it's coming into automotive retail, and it is a reality.
I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. During the pandemic, I bought my last vehicle. 99% of the transaction was done over text message. I didn't go in. I knew what I wanted. It was just an upgrade, and we communicated over text. And yet at the same time, there were other dealerships who just kept calling, and I'm like, I'm not answering. That maybe there's a clue there, right? Maybe there's a hint, and so I think it's being open to understanding that buyers' preferences are maybe more important than what your playbook is. So that's always a challenge. And question and answer, it's open. Feel free to drop those in. We will definitely get to those at the end. I thought there was a quick one we could knock out real quick. Kirk, the Audi dealer data agreement, was that voluntary or mandatory?
Yeah, I typed that in the response. That was voluntary.
Okay.
And I'm pretty proud to say that all of our dealers signed it. And so there was a ton of collaboration that went in ahead of time in writing and drafting the agreement. So we worked with, many of our dealers on kind of like a work group as we were drafting some of the large public groups. We worked with them to draft language that was going to be acceptable to both. And that's, to me, one of the most frustrating things that I've seen in the last few years with these, OEM direct manufacturers, selling the vehicles directly to the consumer, is that I see all these walls being built between the traditional OEMs and their dealer franchises, and it's not doing any of us any good. And so that's what we work really hard on, is trying to break down those walls and those barriers to figure out how we can come up with some sort of collaborative solution so that we all can benefit from it.
Well, the average consumer doesn't see it as Audi dealer group and Audi OEM. They see it as Audi, right? That it's one brand, and they kind of just put everybody together. So it makes it easier for the consumer, obviously. So
yeah, absolutely. But I want to also hit Zach on something that you said a minute ago with respect to kind of like the processes, because that's one of the key things for me is we obviously have to get better with our data, right? There's so much that we know about the consumers. It's fragmented. We got to figure out a way to bring it all together so we can utilize it better. But just today, though, we have a lot of information about our consumers that we're just not using, or we're not using it properly, right? And so on your example, it's very possible that you had put in a message when, I don't know how you contacted the dealerships, but in a lead form or whatever, that you didn't want to be called. And we've got that data available to us. That's just one simple piece of data that says the consumer would prefer to be texted or emailed or whatever and doesn't want to be called, but we're either not looking at it or we're totally ignoring it. And so to me, this is kind of like a two-pronged approach. As you said, we have to work on improving our technology, improving the data, getting it all together. But at the same time, we need to use it properly and put the processes in place to make sure that just because we have the data, it doesn't mean that the consumer experience is going to improve. Right.
Right. You've got action on it too. So, Brian, there was a quick question on what other sources of revenue were you referring to? And you're mute.
There we go. I'm just trying to be polite. So other source of revenue, I want you to define that as new ways to generate revenue for the existing departments, right? So for example, in a CDP, we can append other data about our consumers that apply like their lifestyle, that things could be more connecting with them. And in real time, if you know the person is a pet owner, you could be pushing out ads to them with cars that have pets in them. You know what I mean? You can import recall lists from the OEM and do a tiered cost approach to notifying them on recalls, and maybe not even contacting the recall people where you don't have parts or service facilities. The things that we never knew before was even someone's out shopping in the marketplace, not at the dealer's website, but since you have a central record for the consumer, you can be triggered. Instead of buying third-party audiences from strangers, like in-market shoppers, you could actually know your shoppers are out, and then knowing their history, knowing their buying process. New source of revenue, finding out people who are servicing at independent service facilities and creating specific offers to them. So when I say new sources of revenue, I mean new strategies to fill the service drive, or to retain customers, or to keep them within your dealer group. This was never possible because we never knew what the individuals were doing. We just did spray, pray, and blind retargeting. This is a new world. And then, as Kirk mentioned, the future, I believe, is OEM clean rooms. I believe, like for the larger dealer groups, the OEMs are going to realize that they have valuable information, the dealer has valuable information, and that intersection could be safely and privacy compliant updated in some type of safe room, clean room.
And I just got to chime in, a lot of these topics we're talking about, right? It kind of goes back to that CDP, Kirk, to your point of, customer preferences on how they want to be communicated to, right? Like having an enterprise consent and privacy preferences platform, as an example. I'm Jordan, I like text messages, and I don't want you to send me marketing emails. Versus Kirk, maybe you want phone calls, right? And it's a really hard thing to wrangle in, but when you think of what a CDP in some regards can do, they can help in that. And then Brian, I love the targeted advertising, right? That dynamic advertising of putting a dog in the car or an animal in the car. If you know who that person is, it can really help create that personalization, which, outside of automotive, we all get fed to us all the time, right? So.
All right, so Jordan, I'm going to stick with you for this one. So let's say everybody listening here, they're in agreement. Journeys are important. We need to use the data. It's not as easy as just saying that, though, right? There's challenges, there's difficulties. So what are some of the things that dealer groups are going to deal with that they have to overcome? And what are some of the ways maybe they get around those challenges?
Yeah, we hit on a little bit earlier, but I would say multiple touch points, right? So if you think of that the automotive buying journey, it includes online, offline touch points. It includes researching online, configuring a vehicle, visiting a dealer, right? So obviously those different online and offline touch points throughout that journey are really hard to kind of get your arms around. So that's definitely a challenge I think a lot of folks face. The second one that comes to mind for me is like long buying cycles, right? So buying a vehicle is oftentimes the second, third most expensive purchase that somebody makes in their life behind a home or a boat or whatever that may be. So the buying cycle is much longer. So keeping track and understanding that buying cycle over the course of weeks or even months, that's very difficult. And then, of course, data fragmentation, which is something we hit on at the beginning, right? The data is scattered across multiple systems, things like reservation systems, CRM, marketing platforms, dealership systems, third-party databases. And now, especially with these, EV reservations that are happening, you have manufacturing systems that are starting to come into play. People don't want to just make an EV reservation and then it's a black hole for a year or two, right? So you really got to link all of those data, I would say, fragmentation and siloed systems together as some of the challenges. How they overcome them, right, is integrating those data sources through a unified platform. So who is Brian? Who is Kirk? Who is Zach? What do they like? How do they affiliate, right? Really create that personal, emotional attachment to the brand. We talked about understanding the buyer journey, right? Doing things like customer journey mapping, highly important. But I think also analyzing and measuring, right? Making sure you're headed in the right direction, doing things like feedback, conduct surveys, get feedback, do focus groups, right? And then, of course, got to give Treasure Data a little bit of a plug, right? Adopt new technologies through partnerships. There's plenty of technology and software companies that specialize in these things, and sometimes just paying for that solution versus trying to build it in-house is an easy way to get past it. So,
well, and we're not even just talking about a buying journey as in I'm going to buy a car today, but it's the life cycle, right? Because now we got to go from first purchase to then repeat purchases, and we want to keep them in the brand. And we want, so what happens for those 2 or 3 years while they're a driver and not necessarily buying, but they're keeping their eyes, and knowing the preferences, right? There are people who buy cars every 6, 12, 18 months because that's what they do. And then there's other people who will drive them till the wheels fall off. And so understanding the 2 different, or 3 or 12 or 15 different kind of middle segments is also, part of this process. So how does AI play into this? I don't think we can do a webinar or a conversation anymore without saying the word AI. I think there's a lot of hype out there. And I've got some examples of even customers we've dealt with, but curious for you guys first. Jordan, maybe from a tech perspective, what are your thoughts on how do brands use AI? What's good? How do you plan for it? What are some opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted to add on to what you said in the prior section, though, about that loyalty, right? And building that brand over time and that journey over time. And, it's really about making the right offer at the right time in the right channel, which is very easy to say, very difficult to do. So I would say from an AI perspective, at this point, most automotive companies, they are leveraging artificial intelligence in some way, shape, or form. When you think about things like product development, autonomous mobility, natural language processing and call centers, chatbots, predictive service maintenance, there's a lot of use cases that AI power. In my opinion, I believe that over time, the use of AI and, of course, generative AI, which is such a hot topic right now, will become a larger part of the overall digital customer experience in buying journey and also loyalty journey as well. So from a selling perspective, making relevant offers based on things like propensity models to buy, right? So is Kirk a truck customer, or is he a sports car customer? And, let's profile Kirk and see what other people like him buy, and let's go send him a message that way, right? Or from even an upselling perspective, right? A lot of lookalike modelings. I got to give Amazon a little bit of a plug. I think they do a great job with, hey, people like you buy this, right? And make those recommended data-based offers based on artificial intelligence. But I would say, what customers or what brands really need to do, though, to make sure that, AI doesn't become, you don't want it to become like, there's always that human touch, right? You don't want to forget about that human touch. And you don't want to rely on artificial intelligence all the time, but you got to keep privacy and data security top of mind. The more you invest in AI and artificial intelligence, I think, to your customers, you want to continue earning that trust and keeping that trust. So be transparent about how the data is being used. And then make sure there's no biased decision making in the artificial intelligence, right? It learns based out of history typically, and you want to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself. So at least my perspectives on AI. I don't know if Brian or Kirk, you got something?
Yeah. Let me just make a couple comments, because obviously the conversation about AI is important. In automotive retail, there are companies that have specialized and built wonderful businesses on taking dealers' data and kind of mashing it together with third-party sources to figure out equity mining office or service cycle. As some of the larger dealer groups are moving into a CDP, these companies are going to have to pivot to almost do BI as a service, right? Instead of taking copies from the DMS and the CRM or whatever, they're going to be needing to plug into the CDP and run their, proven business models. And a lot of those business models will be improved with AI. One of the other challenges in automotive retail that I'm finding is accurate disposal data. And we all have received emails and postal mail from dealers offering to buy a car that we traded to them 2 or 3 years ago. And you say like, no, I sold the car to you. Why? Okay. The problem seems to be that before the focus on first party data has evolved, we had no idea if the service marketing company was doing regular data hygiene. We had no idea if the equity mining company was doing regular data hygiene, because there was no way to inspect it. The data was pushed to an outsourced system. I see the future very, very interesting is maybe AI is going to do a better job of crunching all of the data that's available to really know who really owns this car. Because today, everyone says the weakness in automotive retail CDPs is we're absolutely not sure who owns the vehicle. And as a result, there's tens of millions of dollars wasted in faux messaging and faux marketing. I think AI is going to be able to crunch a lot more of the data from multiple sources to try to figure out true ownership models.
Well, and I think it also takes out the idea of, in a dealership, salesperson, they're down to only sometimes a couple physical touch points, right? All of this other stuff happens digitally. So now how is a salesperson going to predict the likelihood of a customer to buy? The machines can do that a whole lot better, that they can manage that process. And we do that with customers. That's a very simple, kind of straightforward use case of saying, rather than having salesperson happy ears because they only have 1 or 2 touch points, you have all of this other data that now we can get together and truly, from a forecasting perspective, from a revenue perspective. And then if they're not likely to buy, like you said, Brian, cut back on some of that spending or change your model, change your focus on revenue. So I think that the change is the key point there. It gives you the opportunity to have new ways of, either from an activation perspective, from a campaign perspective, from a data ownership or data lineage perspective, just give you some new opportunities to test and try and iterate. So, all right. So we've got all these touch points. We've got all these journeys. We've got all this stuff going on. It's not going to get any simpler, right? There's never going to be less touch points. Probably there's only going to be more. Somebody's going to be able to sell a car, buy a car through TikTok at some point. Or something, or whatever's next, right? And so, Brian, maybe I'll start with you, and then Jordan, Kirk, I want to get all your kind of feedback on this one. But like, how does a brand maintain that relationship with buyers? How do they keep that personal experience, that personalized kind of feeling of walking into your dealership and talking to your friend, now that there's all of these hundreds of touch points, multiple ways in and out, and just this complexity?
Sure.
And real quick though, Brian, I just want to add the hard part though for automotive is we have 2 different brands, right? In some respects, I mean, you've got the dealer brand and you've got the OEM brand. Now, many customers see that as the same, okay, with one respect, But at the same time, we have to make sure that we manage both sides, right? So I'm trying to build a relationship with the consumers from an OEM standpoint, but the dealer's trying to build a relationship with them at the same time. Sorry, Brian, go right ahead.
No, yeah.
Yeah, no, and Kurt, I'm going to throw a little grenade over in your hand. So I'm going to answer the question. I'm going to throw a little grenade over to you because we can't have a play nice webinar. But I'm very interested on how dealers get the connected car data into their CDP. You know, it seems right now that connected car experience could be amazing for really creating an even more personalized experience. So I want to know what Audi's plans is on sharing, but let me answer the broader question that Jack has. Since it's complex and since there's many touch points, how do we maintain brand loyalty? And I think that for most in automotive retail, we've never had the tools. So the first thing is we got to invest in world-class tools. And I've done the math for dealer groups, the cost. Some people say, oh, a CDP like treasure data is too expensive. And I tell them, no, absolutely. When you do the math, you should have invested in it years ago. Meaning the math is so compelling. So number one, if you really want to maintain your brand, you have to know who your customer is, very fundamental level. Number two, and I've heard different opinions on this, but the automotive industry is primarily a phone business. And yes, we get some leads, but once that lead comes in, we're texting or talking. And we can't have a full picture of the customer unless we have all the call records and outcomes. And the great news with AI is that the call transcripts are being done automated now. The call outcomes are very accurate. So from a phone call, we can know if a service or a test drive was booked. I mean, there's rich call data. So anybody who's trying to do a customer journey from DMS and CRM only, you know, they're just missing, they're missing too many signals about how customers prefer to communicate and how we operate. And the third point is there has to be someone responsible in the dealership for the customer experience. And I'm calling the role a customer data manager. I don't think for most dealer groups, they want another C-suite executive or pay for a C-suite executive. But normally you have a CTO and a CMO. I think there's a new role that sits in between there. Is this customer data manager, a CDM? And their job is to make sure that the data is being unified, the data is being activated, personalized communications are available, and through audience building. So if you really want to control your brand loyalty, stop making excuses that the tech is expensive. It isn't. Make sure you're bringing all the touch points that are meaningful for automotive, and then there has to be a champion. Those would be the three pillars of success, I think, for auto dealer groups moving forward.
All right, so you want me to pick up that grenade, Brian? Do I throw it back at you now? You know? Yeah. No, it's not really grenade. I mean, we obviously see a ton of value in those the connected car services and the information that's available. With respect to how we can market extended service products or whatever to consumers and ways to make their life easier. I think one of the biggest challenges is the privacy and data security that we talked about earlier. Okay, so we have connected car services at Audi on our vehicles, but we have to make absolutely sure that we know exactly who is operating the vehicle and whose information we're actually tracking, who owns the vehicle, et cetera. And so it's kind of a cumbersome process for us to verify. And so we have a very extensive onboarding system, right? Because Brian, if to your point earlier, if I'm trying to collect data on Kirk, but Kirk doesn't own that car anymore, Okay, maybe Kirk has signed off on me collecting his data. Kirk's okay with it. Okay, but it's not actually Kirk that's driving the vehicle or doesn't own the vehicle anymore. Then that's a problem, right? Then we're collecting data on somebody who didn't give us the permission to do so. And so it's a cumbersome process, and it's a fine line, and it's a balance between how much we make the customers go through in order for us to verify that it's them and that we're keeping their information secure. And they may look at it and say, well, I don't want to go through all this stuff. I don't understand what value it's providing to me as a consumer. Why make me go through all of these different steps, to have to for the connected car services. So we've had people that are in vehicles that have connected car services that don't opt into them. They don't go through the actual enrollment process. So they're driving around in our vehicle and we're not actually collecting any data on them because they haven't enrolled. Because maybe they think the process is too cumbersome, or they don't want to enroll because we haven't made it a clear value to them as far as why they should enroll in the connected car services. So to me, I think that's part of it. And this all circles back around to, why is it so hard for us to put all this data together? It's that data privacy. And so we have data in various different databases throughout the company that we can't transmit back and forth because of data privacy or with other outside vendors. And so that's making it very difficult for us to consolidate it all in one place. Like for instance, we have customers that we are not allowed to market to because they've opted out, but we still want their other information. And so how do we segregate that? And that's made it pretty challenging.
Well, and when you think about, a multi-person household as well, right? So how do you manage when there's 3 people driving that's the same car, or husband and wife share, or, parent and kids, or whatever dynamic you have, who do you talk to? How do you manage that? I mean, what's Audi's strategy, or what's your thought behind that, or just holistically, what's your take on it, Kirk?
Yeah, good question, Zach. I mean, so the connected data and the data services is not in my organization per se, but I think from a big picture perspective, we obviously take it, customers' data privacy very, very seriously. And we want to make sure we're probably, I would say, going to err on the side of caution, more than anything, to make sure that we have, because the last thing, you can unlock and unlock your vehicle with. And so, God forbid that gets in the wrong hands, right? And you have somebody that's able to lock and unlock a person's vehicle. So we're going to err on the side of caution in most cases, but I think we're still kind of at the beginning stages of figuring out all that we can do with the information that's available. We see all these different data sources, but I think we're still kind of in the beginning stages of figuring out how to put it all together, make it valuable for us and make it valuable for the dealers.
Well, and I think that's the key word there.
Say, Zach, I can take it too, by the way. That is right up my domain too. So I do have a little bit of a perspective on it. So I think first, Brian, to, the vehicle data, I think there's a nice tie of that vehicle data to dealerships to sell additional service revenue, right? So the dealers forever have been getting a piece of the pie on selling the hardware and the aftermarket parts. But what about when we're at a software-defined vehicle age, and people are selling autonomous driving packages and EV range extenders and whatever that may be? Letting the dealer partake in that type of sales and getting a piece of the pie is a potential opportunity for that vehicle data. And then I think, Zach, to the profiles, right? Of course, privacy, preferences, knowing who the customer is. Ultimately, the industry is going to get to, very software defined, software at the center of the vehicle. So as long as we can create like a seamless integrated experience and have those true profiles in the vehicle, right? Like, hey, I'm Zach, I'm logged into the app. This is my profile today.
Yep.
Or, hey, I'm sitting in the vehicle and driving today. I'm Zach. This is not my daughter or my son. And if you make it super easy, a pop-up on the infotainment screen or something you can do right at the steering wheel, I think that's how you can get around those different unique challenges as well.
Well, and I think not just easy, but valuable, right? We talk about this in a lot of other industries as well. There's the value exchange of sharing my information. I'm willing to give you information if I'm getting personalized recommendations, if I'm getting, whatever. Think of all your streaming services. We all have different profiles set up on our streaming services that we log into when we get there, because I want my recommendations, my shows, my watch list. When I get on a plane, I pull up Netflix. I want my downloads to match. And I think that opportunity extends itself now to the connected car, right? I know there's certain places I like to drive to, when I connect my phone, or when I don't even have to connect my phone, that gets even easier and better, right? Where now I can pick my favorites, whether, from a navigation perspective or from a car preferences or whatever. The value exchange is where I think, to me, honestly, the tech has missed a lot of that so far. We've been trying to get it into the car now, and Jordan, I know you guys do a lot of that with AWS. It's like let's solve the technical part, because that's the long tail. It takes a while to get it into a car, but now we've got to start figuring out how do we make that valuable for the consumer and show them that value very quickly. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts on that idea, but.
So Zach, I can comment on that real quick. I mean, so
Sure.
when I get into my vehicle, the first thing it pops up on the MMI screen is it asks me who I am, right? Am I Kirk? Do I want to log in as Kirk, or do I want to log in as a guest? Okay. And so I can do either one, but it's not necessarily intuitive to a consumer what the benefits are to them if they log in with a profile, to your point, right? And so it's like, if I log in as a guest, I can still use my Apple CarPlay. I can still do this. I can still do that. What are the benefits? I still have my memory settings and my seats. You know what I mean? So that's what I think we have to do a better job of communicating to consumers. What is the value exchange for them providing their information to us, or us collecting their information? What are you actually going to get out of it? I mean, I'm one of these people that don't mind all these companies that snoop on my searching in my browsers, because I get fed products that I'm interested in for the most part. You know what I mean? And so I see a benefit out of it in most cases. So we have to do a better job of showing them the benefit.
No, I absolutely agree. So, all right, so we're bought in. We're looking in the future. We're going to do this journey thing. We're a dealer group, but what are some challenges or some misconceptions maybe that people may have going into this? They think they have it figured out. And Brian, you deal with this day in and day out. So I'll start with you, but how do you, what are the problems or the stumbling blocks that you tend to see with the customers you work with?
Sure. I think just as an industry, because we only worked in the framework that we had, is that we put people in buyer journey. They're in a truck, they're a truck buyer. They went to my VDP, they looked at a truck. And so they cut a list, they give it to their agency. It's completely disconnected. And they're in a, Amazon OTT, they're in Facebook, they're in Google, they're in that truck journey, whatever. And the next day they come into the website and do something different, and that list is already cut. So what we have to understand is consumers, especially early on, are bumping around between brands and models. They're doing their education. So our marketing and our journey mapping has to be dynamic. And that's what CDPs do. Someone can move from one journey to another based on a website activity, based on a phone call, based on a service booking. And we've never had that before. So stop trying to figure out and push people into boxes. Let their data speak to create a bespoke. And then secondly, that when you talk about the customer journey, please don't limit it to marketing. I think that's the initial use case, but I believe the big money for brand loyalty, for LTV, and for increasing revenue is the consumer feels the dealer knows who they are, appreciates them, and gone to the extra effort. So when I think of activation, it's marketing and a whole list of opportunities, but it's also communication. And I think that if we buy into a CDP project and miss the personalized communication, we're missing the biggest piece of the revenue. That's my thought, because today, when dealers send that email on a car that they no longer own, or offer to buy the car that they already sold to them, the message is loud and clear. You're just a number, you're not important, and we don't care to be accurate with you. When we take personalized communication to the next level, the whole tone of the relationship with the dealership will change.
I couldn't have said that better. And I totally agree with you. So We're winding down on time here. Again, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A. We'll do a couple of them live here in a minute. But final thoughts before we jump to Q&A. So let's talk about future. What do you think the future is going to look like? Either, trends, tech. I'll leave that one kind of open-ended. And Jordan, maybe I'll start with you. What do you think is going to impact those listening today or those watching us today?
Yeah, first, I just want to say it's truly fun to be in the automotive industry right now, right? Because the amount of pace and innovation happening, it's just unprecedented. So I think over the next 5, 10, 15 years, there's going to be a tremendous amount of change. Some of the trends that I'm seeing, and I think a lot of us are seeing are, I don't even want to say direct-to-consumer shopping. It can be, direct-to-consumer reservations, but more of that direct-to-the-consumer relationship. And then in the US, that of course means seamless integration and data flow into the dealer systems from that reservation, right? In Europe, it might look a little bit differently. Metaverse and augmented reality type experiences. 2 years ago, if you asked me about that, I wouldn't have even really batted an eye, but I'm seeing it, right? Things like virtual test drives, virtual dealerships, realistic car configurators, 3D car configurators that let you personalize and sit in the vehicle as you build them out. I think in-vehicle commerce is going to become a lot larger. So using the car in the mobile app is the primary means of communicating with the customer. When you think about how many emails you get in a given day or text messages, it's overwhelming. I think that, being in the vehicle and using the vehicle's mobile app is just a great way to really get mind share from customers. And then, of course, I hit on things like vehicle connectivity and software-defined vehicle, but also, EV and autonomous vehicles, of course. Advanced safety features. I'm kind of just rattling off top of mind to me of the trends that I'm seeing. But yeah, a lot going on at once. It's not the same old auto. I don't know, Brian or Kirk, if you have anything.
Brian, how about you? What's the future hold?
Well, I think as an industry observer, I think Techion did something to wake up the entire auto industry because they sold the industry and some OEMs on this concept of an end-to-end e-commerce platform. One neck to choke with open APIs, and they've gotten a lot of attention. They still have a lot to deliver on that vision, but what it did do is wake up the incumbents like Reynolds and CDK and Cox to say, guys, we've intentionally delayed software integration. We've intentionally delayed single sourced identification across all our apps, single login. So I think what we're going to see is the Techion effect, that the acceleration to a single retail platform with competition from some major players, increased focus on dealers choosing apps that have APIs, bi-directional APIs. I think that's a future. I know the dealer groups I'm working with, they're firing customers who are not supporting the Automotive Standards Council event naming for GA4, and they're getting rid of vendors who don't have bi-directional APIs. So I think a more open ecosystem with the tech platform that could follow the customer journey, whether it's a Techion model, one neck to choke, or Reynolds doing a true end-to-end across with a single customer identification layer. We're going to see finally the resolution of fractional software start to go away.
And Kirk, what do you think? What's the future?
Wow, these guys didn't give me a whole lot left. And so outstanding list from Jordan and Brian there. So I think from my perspective, I think you're going to see much more from connected car services. Absolutely. I mean, our digital team is doing some outstanding work. We've got a lot of plans in the future to be able to deliver the customers much more connected car services as we learn more about them, serving them up, a more personalized experience and a more personalized connection with the brand. So I'm pretty excited about where we're going there. I would say the only thing that that wasn't touched yet that I'm super excited about is where we're going with digital retailing, especially e-contracting. So we talk a lot about buying cars online, but I think most of us know you can't really buy a car online like you can buy something at Amazon, right? There's usually a person kind of behind the scenes that is assisting you through the process. It's not really automated. I don't have somebody sitting, at least I don't believe I do, Jordan. I don't have somebody sitting at Amazon that's actually manually pushing, my transaction through to completion. And we kind of have that in automotive. What I'm really excited about, the digital retailing tools that we have today are doing a really good job with respect to calculating consumers' payments and showing them the different options to purchase their vehicle, and you can submit a credit application, but it kind of breaks down there, right? Once we submit the credit application, it kind of has to go manual at that point, and somebody at the dealership has to pick it up. We're working on some exciting projects, as I'm sure many are in the industry, where we'd like to make that more automatic, right? Where a customer submits a credit application and can get a real-time approval. And then if they get real-time approval, can they move right into contracting? And if they, and then can they go all the way through the contracting aspect of it? And then at the end of the day, they're doing this at 2 o'clock in the morning, completely unassisted. To me, that's really kind of the future of automotive retail for those who want to do that. I'm not discouraging people from coming into a dealership by any means if they want to come in and test drive a vehicle and find out more about it, build a relationship with their sales consultant, of course. But for those who know what they want, and maybe at 2 o'clock in the morning, they want to pretty much buy a car on their own, and they have the financing to be able to do it. So that's what I'm really excited about. I feel in the next few years we're going to get much closer to that, to allow a customer to kind of do some things automatic, and that's what I'm really excited about as we get more cooperation amongst all of the different vendors in the space. And that's what I've really seen that's excited me over the last couple of years, is some of these traditional competitors have really started to work together. And that's exciting.
Very good.
Kirk, will there be a blood alcohol test feature in Audi digital retailing? So if like somebody had a complete bottle of wine and decided to order at 2 a.m., that it could put the order on hold? I'm just asking for a friend.
Yeah. Brian's worried about buying a car in the middle of the night.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I do think there's some laws out there to protect you, Brian, and it is the dealer's vehicle, and so the dealer does ultimately have to accept the co-sign or countersign, I should say, at the end of the day. But I will put that in place for everybody. You okay? Because we can obviously use additional revenue.
Well, we've answered most of the Q&A live as we were kind of going through this. They kind of fit them in to the questions, but I do have one here for whoever wants to field this one. So what role do you see for the dealer network for in-car transactions away from like car maintenance? So like paying for fueling, charging, curbside pickup, parking, etc. Often maybe enabled via infotainment screen. How do you see the dealer network fitting into that?
Loaded question for me. So what I'm going to tell you is that it's all about collaboration, right? So we work with our dealer working groups and our dealer council on trying to figure out what's the best path for that, right? And so there's a lot of work I think that still needs to be done with respect to some of those that were just thrown up, but I don't believe it's necessarily one way or the other. I think we need to figure out the best way to kind of share those potential revenues.
Yeah, I want to add, Kirk, and you cut out a little bit for me, so you may have said this, so apologies if it's redundant, but I think training is a really good opportunity for the dealers to help in that aspect. And then of course, for doing that training, getting rewarded in some type of compensation. But this is a big shift in how people are operating. So just training on the infotainment system, teaching customers about things like paying for tolls and EV charging and how it can all be done in the in-vehicle is a good place and a good role for the dealers as well.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we have come to the end. We are out of time, and I want to respect everybody's time and busy schedule. So Jordan, Kirk, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Paul, thank you for hosting this and letting us all come and crash your party for an hour and talk amongst ourselves. A lot of good takeaways, a lot of good questions. Thank you, the audience, for sharing them. We'll make sure to keep Brian away from car ordering in the middle of the night. We've learned that. And for everybody else, thank you for being with us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Paul or to myself at Treasure Data. And again, we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, just like to echo that. Thanks so much for everyone's time. Thank you for joining. And like I mentioned at the start of the call, we'll be sending the recordings out to everyone who registered for the session. If you don't receive those, or if you have any other questions for the panelists or for the Treasure Data team, please feel free to give me a direct message. But thanks so much to our panelists and Zach for hosting. And look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.